Zara had never seen anything like this before. From behind the thick red leaves, she watched the human sit calmly beside a fire. The sky above was dark, the air filled with the sounds of dangerous beasts. But the man did not seem afraid. Instead, he was cooking something, slowly turning it over the flames, and not just anything. He was roasting the apex predator of the jungle, the most feared creature on the planet, the great clawfang. Zara's heart raced. Her people told stories about the clawfang, how it killed without sound, how even the strongest warriors ran from it. But now, right in front of her eyes, this human, this strange creature from the sky, was feasting on it like it was just meat. She whispered to herself, "He can't be real." 3 days ago, his ship had crashed. A burning light had streaked across the sky and fallen deep into the jungle. Everyone thought he was dead. Zara had gone to check the wreckage alone, hoping to collect tech pieces or metals, but instead, she saw movement. A human had crawled out, bleeding and coughing. She didn't help. She watched, hidden, thinking he would die soon. No water, no food, no protection. The jungle would eat him alive. But he didn't die. On the first night, he started a fire. On the second, he made a spear. By the third day, he was exploring like he belonged here. And now, he was eating the jungle's king. Zara wanted to run, to tell her people, but she stayed. Something in her told her this moment was bigger than her. This was not just about a human surviving. This was something else. Something new. She moved closer, staying low and quiet. The fire cracked. The smell of cooked meat filled the air. The human looked up, alert, eyes scanning the trees. For a second, Zara froze. Had he seen her? No. He returned to his food, relaxed again. She noticed his tools, sharp sticks, stones tied with vines, a water pouch made from leaves. All simple, yet clever. He had learned so fast. Zara came from a proud species. Her people ruled these lands, avoided the predators, and lived with respect for the wild. But this human, this outsider, he did not avoid the danger. He faced it, and he won. She remembered the stories of other worlds. Old records said humans were weak, soft, and slow. They relied on machines. They feared battle. But this one, he was different. She kept watching. The man finished eating, then pulled out a small glowing cube from his pocket. He tapped it, and a projection appeared. Small images of other planets, other animals, other humans. Zara's eyes widened. He had fought creatures like the clawfang before. This wasn't his first time. This was normal for him. A chill ran down her spine. He wasn't lost. He wasn't lucky. He was trained for this. Suddenly, the human stood up. He looked directly into the trees where she was hiding. Zara held her breath. He raised his hand slowly, then pointed toward her. He knew she was there all along. She stepped out from the trees slowly, hands open, no weapons. The human watched her, calm but cautious. They stood facing each other, two beings from different worlds. Neither spoke then. The man did something unexpected. He smiled, then tossed a small piece of meat toward her feet. A gift. Zara looked down, then back at him. Was it a trap? No. He had many chances to harm her but never did. She picked up the meat and took a bite. Her eyes widened. It was the best thing she had ever tasted, and it was clawfang. The fear, the pride, the confusion, all mixed inside her. She had to know more about him. Back at her village, they would not believe this. They would say she's lying. They would say the human is dangerous. But Zara knew the truth now. This human was not just a survivor. He was a force, a challenge to everything they thought they knew. As she sat beside his fire, both silent, sharing food, one thought repeated in her mind. What is this species? Zara could not sleep that night. Even as she returned to her village, her mind stayed near the fire, near the human. She kept seeing that moment, the way he looked at her without fear, the way he offered food like they were equals. But most of all, she kept seeing the dead clawfang, its burned skin and lifeless eyes, killed by a single human. It was not just strange, it was impossible. The clawfang was more than a predator, it was a nightmare. It hunted alone, moved in silence, and attacked with deadly speed. It had 6 legs, 3 rows of teeth, and skin thick enough to block plasma darts. Even the bravest of Zeras. People avoided its territory. It didn't just kill, it erased anything in its path. But this human, he had done more than kill it. He had cooked it, eaten it, and used its bones to craft tools. He turned terror into dinner, and he did it alone. Zara needed answers. She woke early and returned to the jungle, tracking his steps. She moved fast, climbed trees, crossed rivers, until she found signs. Broken branches, footprints, claw marks, blood trails, signs of battle, but not just a fight. This was a hunt. She followed the path to a rocky hill. From the top she saw the full picture. There, below her, was a massive pit covered with branches and leaves. Inside it, bones of smaller beasts, torn meat, and at the center, the crushed body of a clawfang. He had made a trap. Zira's eyes widened. The clawfang had not been killed in a fight. It had been outsmarted. She imagined it. The human studying the beast, learning its patterns, its path, its habits, then digging the trap silently, luring it with scent or noise. And when the clawfang leapt, it fell straight into the pit. It must have roared, clawed at the walls, tried to escape, but it failed. The predator became prey. Zara shivered. This kind of thinking. It was dangerous. It was human. As she walked closer, she found more signs. Spears made of sharpened bone, nets woven from jungle vines. Everything built from scratch, from nature, with nothing but knowledge and instinct. She touched the netting gently, then whispered, "He learns fast." Suddenly, a sound, a rustle in the trees, light footsteps. Zara turned quickly, hand on her blade, but it was him, the human. He stepped out from the shadows with calm eyes. He was holding a bundle of fruit and roots. When he saw her, he did not reach for a weapon. He simply nodded like he expected her to be here, and maybe he had. Zara stepped back cautiously. He raised his hand, slowly, then placed the food on a flat rock between them. He pointed at the fruit, then to her, an offer, peace, or maybe something more. She stepped forward slowly and took one. It was sweet, fresh, safe to eat. He took one too, eating it casually, like this was normal. But nothing about this was normal. Zara spoke softly, using simple trade words. "Why, clawfang?" She pointed to the pit, then to him. "Why kill?" The human paused, thinking. Then he pulled out his cube again. He pressed it, and a new image appeared. A spinning hologram of a world, not this one, but earth, mountains, forests, deserts, snow, then animals, tigers, wolves, bears, all powerful predators. And next, humans, tiny by comparison, yet hunting them, standing over their bodies, carrying fire and tools. He looked at her and tapped his chest. "Predators," he said. Slowly, then pointed to his head. "Think," Zara understood. He was showing her that humans did not fight with strength alone. They used knowledge, strategy, and courage. They outhought their enemies. She remembered the tales her elders once spoke of, stories of ancient visitors, of a species who walked through war and fire and came out stronger. But she never believed those stories. Now, one was standing right in front of her, with calm eyes and a mind sharp as a blade. Still, not all her people would see it that way. Many feared what they did not understand, and the fact that a human had killed the clawfang would not bring respect. It would bring fear. Zara stood, serious now. She pointed to the jungle, then to the horizon. "Others will come," she warned. "Not like me." The human nodded slowly. He understood. War might come soon, not from him, but from those who feared him. Zara turned to leave but paused. She looked back at the pit, then at the human again. "Predator," she said quietly, then added, "Teacher," as she disappeared into the trees. The human sat down beside the pit. He didn't look worried. He simply began tying another spear. The jungle roared in the distance, but he didn't flinch. He had faced worse, and if they came for him, he would be ready. Because the predators of this world had met something new, and this time they were not at the top. The jungle was quiet, but Zera's thoughts were loud. Ever since she returned from the humans' camp, her mind had refused to rest. She heard her elders speaking, her warriors training, her people laughing, but it all felt distant, like her. Spirit had not returned with her. It had stayed behind, beside that strange fire, next to the human who should not have survived. Zera had seen many things in her short life. Storms that swallowed trees, beasts that hunted with eyes closed. But she had never seen a creature like him, a man who landed with nothing and still found power, not through muscle, but through mind. Not by running from fear, but by walking toward it. Her curiosity was no longer a whisper, it was a fire burning. Stronger every hour, she had to go back, she had to understand. That night, she took a risk. She left without telling anyone. No weapons, no food. Just silence and a mind full of questions. She followed the trail she had memorized. Broken branches, claw marks, spears in the dirt. The path of a hunter and a survivor when she arrived. At the edge of the humans' camp, something was different. The fire was not burning. The tools were gone. No sign of him. She stepped closer, heart racing. Suddenly, a vine snapped around her ankle. She fell hard to the ground. Dirt in her mouth. Then she heard a click, and something sharp touched her neck. Frozen, she looked up. It was him. The human stood over her, holding one of his bone spears, but his eyes were calm. Not angry, not afraid, just curious. He crouched beside her and slowly cut the vine from her foot. Then he offered her water. Zera took it, still breathing fast. "I came alone," she said, using slow words. "No danger." He didn't speak, but he nodded, then pointed to the jungle behind her. "You followed," he said. His voice was rough but steady. Zera replied, "I needed to know." He sat on a rock, unbothered by the moment. Like being ambushed was just a routine. Zera sat too, watching him carefully. "You don't fear us?" she asked. The human tilted his head, then shook it. "No," he said simply. "I fear only silence." She didn't understand, not fully, but she felt the weight in his words. This was not a man running from death. He had met death many times and learned to sit beside it. Then he did something unexpected. He picked up his cube again and showed her a new image. Not beasts, not battles, but humans, thousands of them, marching, farming, fighting, building. She saw them on strange planets, on dry moons, in snowy fields, always changing, always surviving. She watched in silence, then whispered, "You don't just survive predators. You become the new one." He smiled, just a little, then drew something in the dirt, a circle, with smaller circles around it. He pointed to the center. "Me," he said, then to the outer circles. "Danger." Then he erased the outer ones, leaving only himself. Zera leaned back, stunned. This was not arrogance, this was history. Humans did not live with fear. They replaced it. Back in her village, the elders had started to notice her silence. One of them, a wise old male named Rovan, called her aside. "You've changed," he said. "You walk like someone who knows a secret." Zera did not deny it. Instead, she said, "What if the human is not a threat? What if he is a mirror?" Rovan frowned. "A mirror?" Zera nodded. "He reflects what we could become." But Rovan was not impressed. "You're being pulled by curiosity, not caution," he added. "One day your interest will become your end." Zera didn't argue. She simply walked away. That night, she returned to the jungle again. She couldn't stay away, not because of danger, but because of possibility. Because every moment with the human broke something old inside her and replaced it with something new. When she found him again, he was building something, not a weapon, but a wall, using clawfang bones and jungle stone, a perimeter, a boundary. "Why this?" she asked, pointing to the wall. He replied, "They will come," Zera asked. "My people?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the sky and said, "All of them." She felt the shift, the tension in the air. Something was coming. Not war, not yet, but eyes were watching, from both sides before leaving. Zara placed her hand on the wall, a gesture of respect, then said, "I will come again," the human replied. "Then I will build more chairs." As she walked back, something inside her had changed. This was no longer just about survival. It was about something deeper, curiosity, courage, and maybe connection. But she didn't know that her people had already sent scouts, watching from the trees, bowstrings drawn, fear growing faster than truth. And soon, curiosity would face a darker question. Not what is the human, but how far would they go to stop him? Fear spreads faster than truth. And in Zara's village, fear had already won. She didn't know it yet. But while she met the human again and again, while she listened and learned, while she watched him build walls, traps, and tools, others were watching her. They saw her silence, her sneaking away, her growing change. They saw her speak less and think more, and that scared them. The elders called a meeting in the dark of night. Only the strongest warriors, the oldest minds, the ones who feared change the most. They sat in a circle around the fire, faces tight with anger. The human killed the Clawfang. One said, "Alone. And now he teaches one of ours." Another growled. "He feeds her, shares secrets. He builds weapons. He prepares for war." Rovan, once calm, now angry, stood up. "He is not one of us," he said. "He is not welcome. He's a spark, and if we let him burn, he will set our jungle on fire." There were no votes, no questions, only a single plan. Remove the threat. Silently, quickly, without warning, Zara returned to the village at dawn. She noticed the cold stares, the quiet voices, the missing scouts. She felt it. Like pressure in the air, something was wrong. She tried to speak to Rovan, but he walked past her without a word. She tried to speak to her friend Kier. He only said, "You should not go to the jungle today." But she did. Of course she did. Because the jungle was the only place that made sense now. And the human, he was the only one who listened. Who didn't judge her questions, who didn't fear them. When she arrived, he was not alone. He had set more traps, hidden better. He looked different, calmer. Yes, but sharper too, like a man waiting for something he already knew would come. Zara sat beside him and said, "They're planning something." He didn't ask who, he didn't ask when. He only said, "I know." That night they came, 6 warriors from her village. Fast, trained, silent. They crept through the dark, their faces painted with war colors, their blades dipped in sleeping poison. They had orders, no questions. No noise, no fire. Kill him and return. But they never saw it coming. A sharp branch triggered under one foot. Vines snapped. One was pulled into the trees. Another stepped on soft soil, fell into a pit of thorns. They panicked, tried to regroup, and then light. Blinding white fire from a circle of glowing dust. Not fire from wood, but tech. Old tech from his broken ship, now reborn. The human didn't kill them. He disarmed, trapped, and left them tied to trees with their own ropes by morning. They were still alive, but shaken, humiliated, defeated without blood. And waiting for someone to explain what just happened, Zara found them. She cut their ropes and said only one thing. "You attacked a teacher, not a warrior." Back in the village, shame spread quickly. The story of the failed ambush traveled like wildfire, and with it, a question no one wanted to ask out loud. What if the human is not the enemy? The elders grew quiet. Even Rovan began to doubt. He should have killed them, he said in private. But he didn't. Zara stood before the council that evening. She looked each of them in the eye and said, "Do you see now? He could have destroyed us, but he chose to teach us." Still, some refused to believe. "He's waiting," one elder said. "He wants us weak. He wants us grateful. Then he will strike." Zara didn't answer them. Instead, she turned to the young, the next generation. She showed them his traps, his maps, his tools. She taught them what he taught her, and they listened. The divide had begun. 2 sides now existed in one village. one driven by fear, the other by curiosity, and both watched the jungle like it held a god waiting to speak. Meanwhile, the human kept building, not for war, but for something bigger. He stacked bones into warning towers, carved paths in the dirt, placed sharpened sticks in precise lines. He was not building a fort, he was building a lesson. He knew more would come. Maybe not warriors. Maybe worse, maybe machines or beasts or storms. He didn't know exactly when, but he always knew. Something would come. That's what humans did best: prepare, adapt, survive. And when fear came knocking, they didn't hide. They sharpened their minds like blades. From a high branch, Zara watched him one evening. He looked tired, but focused, she thought. He's not just stronger. He's older, not in years, but in pain. He's fought this fight on 1,000 worlds. She climbed down and joined him. Together they sat in silence. Above them, clouds formed, thick, gray, heavy with warning, and far in the distance, deep in the jungle's heart, something massive began to move. Not human, not alien. Something primal, ancient, and very, very hungry. The real threat was never him. It was what was coming, and soon everyone would learn that the only thing more dangerous than a human with nothing was a human who had something to protect. The stars above the jungle had never looked so close. Zara sat beside the human, both staring upward in silence. She had stopped asking questions. Now, she just listened. A day had passed since the hunters returned, defeated, confused, changed. The village was no longer sure who the enemy was, and for the first time, some began to wonder instead of fear. But Zara, she had already passed wonder. Now, she stood at the edge of understanding. The human pressed a button on his cube again. This time, it didn't show animals or traps or battles. It showed people, humans, young and old, scarred and smiling, walking among ashes, jungles, ice fields, alien deserts, metal cities, broken moons. Every world different, every world dangerous. Yet in every image, humans stood tall, victorious, alive. Zara watched the faces. They looked tired, some broken, some smiling, but they all had the same eyes, eyes that had seen worse and survived. He tapped the screen and zoomed in. A red desert planet. A massive beast roared across the screen, 2 stories tall, armored skin, breath like fire. Then, a group of humans, no weapons, just ropes, sounds, movement. They didn't kill it, they trained it. Zara blinked. You don't always kill? The human shook his head. Not first. Not if we can learn. She pointed to the beast, confused. How? He answered with one word: patterns. Zara thought of her own people, hunters trained since birth, warriors who studied prey movements. But this was more than hunting. This was reprogramming nature itself. The human stood and picked up a small board of symbols. Drawn on it were 4 circles, labeled with simple pictures: beast, weapon, mind, and time. He pointed to each in order, then said, "We are not born apex. We become it." Zara understood now. The Clawfang may have ruled this jungle for centuries, but it never changed, it never grew. It just killed, ate, and slept. But humans? They learned, failed, adapted, repeated, again and again, until the predator was no longer predator, until they became the new top. Not because they were stronger, but because they refused to stay the same. She whispered, "We feared the Clawfang, but it never studied us." The human smiled. "You were lucky. Because we do." That line chilled her bones, not because it was a threat, but because it was a fact. Suddenly, the ground shook. A low, slow rumble, deep and wide. Both looked toward the jungle. The sky flickered purple for a moment. Not thunder, not lightning, something older. Zara turned to him. "You knew this was coming." He nodded. "I saw the signs, but I didn't know if you would." "What is it?" she asked. He paused, then answered, "Your real apex. Not the Clawfang, not me. Something your ancestors buried and forgot." "A long time ago," he explained. "Before his crash, he had intercepted a warning beacon near this region. It was written in an ancient script used by explorers. The message was simple: "Do not awaken the sleeper below." "But I crashed anyway," he said. "And now I think I know why." Zara didn't speak. Her mind spun in circles. If the Clawfang was not the apex, and the human was only a visitor, then what had slept here before anyone remembered? The human stood and walked to a carved wall made of bones. He pressed a spot behind it, revealing a long black shard of metal. It pulsed, faintly alive. "This was not from my ship," he said. "It was already here." He placed it in dirt, and strange symbols lit up around it. Zara stepped back. "What is it?" He replied, "A gate." Zara's breath caught in her chest. "A gate to what?" He looked at her, quiet and serious. "To something that doesn't learn like we do, that just waits. And when it wakes, it doesn't evolve, it consumes." Zara stared at the shard. Something inside her, some old instinct, screamed to run, but she didn't, because now she knew the truth. The Clawfang had ruled this jungle by fear. The human had challenged that fear with knowledge. But this thing, the sleeper, would not be stopped by either. And for the first time, she asked herself not what the human was, but what he was here to stop. She turned to him. "What happens if we do nothing?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the ground where the shard hummed, then said, "We become prey again." The jungle no longer slept. The trees trembled without wind. Birds flew in circles but did not sing. Beasts that once ruled the land now dug into the ground like frightened children. Even the Clawfang, what few were left, had vanished into caves. The jungle was preparing, because something older than fear had returned. Zara stood at the edge of the cliff with the human beside her. Below, the earth cracked open like dry skin. Faint light poured from the gaps, not golden like sunlight, but pale, pulsing, cold. The gate had opened, and something was coming through. "It has no eyes," the human said quietly. "No hunger, no sound. It only knows movement. If it sees you, you run. If it follows you, you burn it. If it touches you, you are no longer you." Zara looked at him. "What is it made of?" The human answered without turning. "Everything we forgot to fear, back in the village." The council finally broke their silence. The sky had turned strange. The plants stopped growing. Children cried without knowing why. The chief stepped down. Rovan stood in his place and said, "We must fight, but not like we always did. This enemy doesn't bleed, so our weapons must change." Zara returned with the human, not as a traitor, but as a guide. She showed the young how to shape bones into curved blades, how to set flame traps using dry jungle resin. The human taught them to dig kill zones, to camouflage fires with steam, to lay pressure lines beneath soft soil. It was not war in the old way. It was strategy. It was evolution in real time. Children sharpened stakes, elders carried stones. Hunters became builders. Even those who once feared the human now watched him with quiet respect. He didn't shout, didn't command, he only built. Showed, corrected, because the jungle had no patience for speeches. Then came the first attack, not loud, not sudden, just a ripple in the dark, a shape that moved without walking, a fluid shadow that swallowed everything it passed. Plants turned black, trees wilted, animals froze in mid-breath. It moved toward the village, no eyes, no limbs, just hunger shaped. Like silence, Zara stood on the front line with others, torch in hand, heart hammering in her chest. The human crouched beside her, holding a slingshot made of vine and clawfang bone. "It will test us," he whispered, "not with strength, but with fear." The first trap went off. A wall of flame shot up, but the creature slithered backward, avoiding it. Then it surged forward again, but a pit opened under it. Spears stabbed upward. Still, it climbed out, slower, but not stopping. The people screamed, but didn't run, because behind them stood someone who had already faced fear on dozens of planets. Someone who never ran. The human tossed a flask into the air. It burst mid-flight, coating the beast in powder. Then he fired a flare. It lit the powder and blue fire. The shadow screamed, not in sound, but in shape. It twisted, shrank, burned, then vanished into the earth. Silence. The jungle exhaled, but only for a moment. Because that was only one of them. More cracks opened, dozens. The real war had begun. For 3 days and 3 nights, the village fought side by side with the human. They learned quickly what burned it, what slowed it, what not to do. They stopped being prey. They started becoming something new. Zara watched a young boy lead 2 creatures into a trap he designed himself. She saw elders holding fire like swords. She saw hunters cry when another fell, but stand again with rage instead of sorrow. This was not survival. This was becoming on the 4th night. The sky cleared, stars returned, the cracks closed, the jungle went quiet again, and the sleeper fell still. Zara and the human stood among the wreckage. Flames burned behind them, smoke danced above them. They were tired, bloody, silent, but alive. The human looked at her and said, "You fought like a human." She smiled softly. "No, we fought like something better." That morning, they buried their dead with new songs. Not about fear, but about fire. Not about beasts, but about becoming the ones who refused to kneel. And far away, deep underground, the last flicker of the sleeper dimmed, not killed, but pushed back by something it never expected. A species that didn't just survive, it learned faster than it died. The jungle was quiet again, but it was not the same jungle. The trees still stood. The wind still whispered through the leaves, but something beneath the soil had shifted. Not just in earth, but in memory. Zara walked slowly through the center of the village, where the fire had once been used for stories. Now it was surrounded by tools made from bone, stone, and scrap metal. Children gathered around her, their eyes not afraid, but wide with questions. They had seen what no child should, but they had survived it. She carried a small box in her hands. It was not of her people's design. It was the human's cube. Now dark, its last light had faded after the battle. Its memories stored deep inside like ghosts frozen in glass. They called her the one who stood beside fire, but she didn't want a title. She only wanted to remember correctly. The human was gone. His ship, repaired with tribal tools and clever tricks, had finally risen into the clouds. He didn't leave with pride. He left with silence. But before he did, he said something she would never forget. "You don't need us to protect you anymore. Now, you understand what it means to be dangerous with purpose." That word, dangerous, once meant something wild, untamed, violent. Now, it meant awareness. Now, it meant knowing when to fight and when to learn. Now it meant having a story that others would fear or follow. Zara carved that story into the village stones. Not in long scrolls or warrior songs, but in symbols, simple ones. A trap, a flame, an open eye, and a hand holding another hand. The new generation would learn these like they learned to walk, because the lesson was no longer survival. It was evolution. And still, deep in the bones of the planet, where the sleeper had once stirred, silence remained. But it wasn't dead. It was listening. Zara stood on a high cliff where the human had once watched the horizon. Now she stood there, alone, not waiting, just ready. Behind her, the village thrived. New buildings made from hybrid materials, stone tied with scrap, vines sewn with wire. Hunters no longer hunted just for meat. They hunted for patterns. The word enemy was no longer given to beasts. It was reserved for stagnation. A group of young warriors sat at her feet. One asked, "Will the humans come back?" Zara nodded. "Maybe," she said. "And when they do, what will we be?" She smiled. Not prey, not pets, not primitives. She looked to the stars and whispered, "We will be the ones who write the warning next time." And that warning would be simple, not a threat, not a cry for help, just one sentence, carved into metal and stone, left at the edge of the jungle. For any species who dared awaken the things below, be careful where you land. The apex has already evolved.